The laughter echoed across the royal observation deck, loud enough for every officer, noble, and warrior to hear. Hundreds of alien eyes turned toward the lone human standing beside a cargo crate, dressed in the plain gray uniform of an apprentice mechanic. His sleeves were stained with engine grease. His boots carried the dust of a dozen hangars. Nothing about him looked impressive, nothing suggested danger. Yet every veteran in the room felt an uneasiness they could not explain. The princess smiled with open amusement. She had crossed half the galaxy to witness the famous selection trials of the apex hunters, the most feared warriors ever assembled. Legends claimed they had hunted monsters that swallowed moons, survived worlds where gravity crushed steel, and defeated civilizations that had ruled the stars for millions of years. She expected to meet champions covered in medals and scars, not a quiet human who barely looked old enough to carry a plasma rifle. "So this is the Apprentice?" she asked, unable to hide her disappointment. The surrounding nobles laughed with her. One officer glanced toward the human before quickly looking away. Another shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. The apprentice simply lowered his head and continued tightening a damaged panel on a transport drone as though the insults had never reached him. The princess stepped closer. "I was told humanity produced dangerous soldiers," she said. "Instead, I find someone repairing cargo equipment." More laughter followed. The human answered without looking up. "It still needs fixing." His calm voice only encouraged more mocking smiles. From her point of view, humans were an unusual species, but hardly legendary. They had entered galactic politics only a few centuries earlier. Their technology was respectable. Their colonies were expanding. They negotiated fairly, fought stubbornly, and survived conditions that shocked many alien civilizations. Still, compared with the ancient empires surrounding them, humanity seemed young. Many species believed humans exaggerated stories about their homeworld. They called Earth a death world. They claimed predators once hunted them for millions of years. They claimed disease, disasters, violent weather, crushing oceans, frozen continents, poisonous animals, and endless wars had shaped every generation. To most civilized species, those stories sounded impossible. No intelligent life should have survived such a planet. Yet humans spoke about it as though enduring impossible odds was simply part of growing up. The princess had always considered those tales little more than political theater. Now, seeing this quiet apprentice, she became even more convinced. Behind her stood the royal guard, warriors equipped with crystalline armor capable of surviving direct orbital bombardment. Nearby waited diplomats from 12 civilizations, military observers from dozens more, and representatives of the apex hunters themselves. Every conversation slowly faded. A transport shuttle descended through the clouds above the station. Nobody had expected another arrival. The black vessel carried no royal insignia. No government markings, no military banners. Its hull was covered with deep scars left by battles that had clearly ended long ago. When the shuttle doors opened, silence spread across the massive landing platform. 6 figures emerged. Each wore dark armor unlike anything produced by the great empires. Each carried weapons that looked ancient yet perfectly maintained. Across countless worlds, every child knew their symbol, the apex hunters. Entire governments negotiated peace rather than risk facing a single hunting fleet. Pirates fled before receiving their transmission. Even military admirals stood when they entered a room. The princess smiled proudly. Surely these legendary warriors would expose the ridiculous idea that the apprentice deserved anyone's attention. She waited confidently. The hunters crossed the platform without speaking. Thousands watched them. The lead hunter finally stopped. Not before the princess, not before the royal commanders, not before the ambassadors. He stopped directly in front of the quiet human still repairing the damaged drone. The apprentice finished tightening one final bolt before slowly standing. He wiped grease from his hands with an old cloth. For a brief moment, nobody moved. Then something happened that no recording in galactic history had ever captured. The leader of the apex hunters removed his helmet. Without hesitation, he placed one armored fist across his chest. Every hunter behind him did exactly the same. Then all 6 lowered their heads in complete respect. The entire station froze. The princess stared in disbelief. Royal guards instinctively reached for their weapons before realizing the hunters had shown no hostility. The diplomats looked at one another, searching for an explanation that did not exist. The human apprentice returned the salute with effortless familiarity. Not like someone meeting legends, like someone greeting old companions. A frightened whisper spread through the crowd. "Who is he?" No one answered. The lead hunter finally spoke. His voice carried across the silent platform. "We have searched the galaxy for you." The apprentice remained calm. "I told you not to. We had no choice." Another hunter stepped forward. His scarred armor bearing marks from battles against creatures few civilizations even believed existed. "The outer swarm has crossed the black expanse." Several alien officers turned pale. The black expanse was considered uncrossable. Nothing intelligent had ever returned from beyond it. The lead hunter took one slow breath before speaking words that drained every trace of confidence from the princess's face. "They are coming for the one who trained us." For the first time since the laughter began, the quiet human looked toward the stars. His expression changed, not with fear, with recognition. The silence that followed seemed heavier than the gravity of any world the princess had ever visited. Thousands of witnesses stood frozen as the 6 apex hunters remained in their respectful salute. Their armor carried scars from battles across the known galaxy, yet every movement they made reflected complete discipline toward the quiet human standing before them. Even the station's artificial intelligence lowered the volume of background announcements, as though the machines themselves sensed the importance of the moment. The princess searched every memory she possessed. The royal academies had taught the history of every major civilization. She had studied famous admirals, legendary explorers, and champions whose names inspired entire fleets. Nowhere had she ever heard of a human mechanic worthy of receiving such respect. "You must have mistaken him for someone else," she finally said. The lead hunter slowly turned toward her. "We have not." His answer was calm, but it carried a certainty that silenced every royal advisor standing nearby. The apprentice simply folded the repair cloth and placed it inside his tool bag. "I left that life behind," he said quietly. "You left," the hunter replied. "The galaxy never escaped it." The princess frowned. "What does that even mean?" No one answered her. Instead, every hunter continued watching the human with the patience of soldiers waiting for a command they had hoped never to hear again. Far beyond the observation windows, stars shimmered against the endless darkness. Cargo ships continued entering and leaving the station, unaware that history had just shifted. One nervous diplomat finally broke the silence. "The outer swarm was destroyed centuries ago." The oldest hunter slowly shook his head. "No, it disappeared. There is a difference." Those words spread unease through every officer present. Most civilizations considered the outer swarm little more than ancient mythology. Records described living fleets made from biological matter instead of metal. Entire star systems had vanished before anyone understood what they were fighting. The oldest archives claimed countless civilizations united against them, only to suffer devastating losses. Then the swarm disappeared. Many historians assumed time itself had defeated them. Others believed they had exhausted their food supply. No one imagined they had simply been waiting. The apprentice finally looked toward the hunter again. "How many?" The answer came without hesitation. "More than before?" A quiet murmur spread through the crowd. Even military commanders felt cold hearing those words. The princess refused to believe it. "Our fleets protect this region," she argued. "Every border is monitored." The hunter nodded respectfully. "So were the borders of the civilizations that came before yours." No one argued after that. The apprentice closed the toolbox with a soft click. "You should have found someone else. We tried. And—" The hunter's expression remained unchanged. "They all died." The station became completely silent once more. For the first time, the princess noticed something strange. Every apex hunter carried nearly identical scars across their armor. Not random damage, the same marks, as if every one of them had survived the same impossible battle. She suddenly realized these warriors were far older than they appeared. Many species lived for centuries. Some live for thousands of years. She had never considered that the apex hunters themselves might be living history. One of the station's historians slowly stepped forward. "I've seen those markings." Everyone looked toward him. He activated an ancient holographic archive. A faded image appeared above the platform. It showed soldiers wearing primitive combat armor beside enormous alien predators on a barren world beneath twin crimson suns. Most of the image had deteriorated with age. Only one figure remained surprisingly clear: a human instructor. His face was impossible to distinguish, yet his posture looked strangely familiar. The historian's hands trembled. "This archive is over 800 years old." He enlarged the image. The apprentice stood quietly without reacting. The princess compared the ancient figure with the man standing beside the toolbox. Same height, same posture. Even the way he folded his hands looked identical. Her heartbeat quickened. Humans did not live 8 centuries. That was impossible. Unless... She pushed the thought away before finishing it. Meanwhile, another alarm quietly activated within the station. Long-range sensors had detected gravitational distortions beyond the edge of explored space. Navigation officers immediately began studying the readings. The distortions did not behave like natural phenomena. They moved together, thousands of them. Then tens of thousands. The tactical display zoomed farther outward. Every officer watching forgot how to breathe. The signal stretched across light years like an ocean of moving shadows. One frightened technician whispered the numbers. "They're not ships. What are they?" "Living objects." Panic threatened to spread through the command center. The apprentice finally walked toward the observation window. From there, the stars appeared peaceful, beautiful, almost innocent. "It always begins quietly," he said. The princess stared at him. "You've seen this before." He did not answer. Instead, he rested one hand against the transparent alloy overlooking the galaxy. For a moment, his calm expression seemed much older than any human face should have been. The lead hunter stepped beside him. "The frontier colonies have already gone silent." "How many?" 23. The apprentice closed his eyes. "Evacuations?" "Too late." Nobody needed further explanation. Even without details, everyone understood. Entire colonies had simply vanished. The royal advisors immediately began transmitting emergency messages toward their governments. Military fleets received orders to prepare defensive formations. Research stations activated deep space telescopes. Scientists searched desperately through forgotten archives for any mention of the returning enemy. Throughout the station, fear spread faster than information. Only one person remained completely calm. The apprentice picked up his worn tool bag. Its fabric looked ordinary, its handles were faded from years of use. No royal treasure or military weapon appeared less impressive. Yet every apex hunter instinctively stepped aside, clearing a path for him without being asked. The princess watched in disbelief. "You really expect me to believe a mechanic is our best hope?" The apprentice finally met her eyes. His voice remained gentle. "I stopped being a mechanic about 5 minutes ago." Before anyone could ask what he meant, every light inside the station suddenly dimmed. The stars beyond the observation window disappeared, not because night had fallen. Something unimaginably massive had moved between the station and the distant sun. And the first transmission from the approaching darkness reached every screen at exactly the same moment. Every display across the station flickered before settling into a single image. It was not a face. It was not even a recognizable creature. Billions of tiny points shifted together like a living ocean, forming patterns that no translator could understand. The station's language cores worked at maximum speed, trying thousands of known communication systems. Every attempt failed. Then a single sentence appeared in every language at once. "Return the first hunter." The message lasted only 3 seconds before every screen went dark. Nobody spoke. The command center erupted into activity. Officers rushed between consoles while emergency sirens echoed through the station. Long-range scanners continued reporting impossible numbers. The objects approaching the frontier were not warships built from metal. Each signal possessed biological energy, changing shape as it moved through space. The princess looked from the dark screens to the quiet human. They're asking for you, he nodded once. I expected they would. You know what they are? I know what they became. That answer only deepened the mystery. The station commander immediately sealed every docking bay. Heavy defense platforms rotated toward deep space while nearby fleets received emergency mobilization orders. Thousands of fighters launched from hidden hangars, forming defensive formations around the station. To most species, such a display represented overwhelming military power. The apex hunters barely glanced at it. One of the younger royal officers noticed. Is something wrong? The oldest hunter answered honestly. It will slow them. For how long? The hunter remained silent. The lack of an answer frightened everyone more than any number could have. The princess stepped beside the observation window again. Countless warships glittered outside, each capable of destroying planets according to military records. She had grown up believing no enemy would ever challenge such strength. Yet the 6 apex hunters watched those fleets with quiet concern rather than confidence. The apprentice opened his old tool bag. The princess expected advanced weapons or hidden technology. Instead, she found simple objects, a worn notebook, a weathered compass, several old tools, a small metal flask. Nothing looked valuable, nothing looked capable of saving a civilization. One hunter smiled faintly. You still carry it. The apprentice held up the notebook. It reminds me where I started. The princess frowned. A notebook? It belonged to my instructor. You crossed galaxies carrying paper? It survived Earth? The hunters exchanged knowing glances. No further explanation seemed necessary to them. To everyone else, it made even less sense. Earth. The word itself carried strange weight among experienced explorers. Every survey team returned with similar reports: violent oceans, predators in nearly every ecosystem, extreme weather, unstable tectonic activity, dangerous microbes, powerful gravity. Even harmless-looking animals often possessed hidden defenses. Alien scientists frequently debated how intelligent life had managed to evolve there at all. Some jokingly claimed Earth was less a planet than a survival examination. Humans usually laughed at those comments. Other species did not. One respected xenobiologist quietly approached the apprentice. I've studied your homeworld. The human looked at her. You've never visited. No civilization would approve such an expedition. He smiled slightly. That's probably wise. She hesitated before asking the question every scientist secretly wondered. Did living there truly shape humanity that much? Instead of answering directly, he pointed toward the station gardens. Artificial sunlight illuminated peaceful trees surrounding a decorative lake. What do you see? A beautiful park, he nodded. A human child sees hazards. She blinked. What hazards? Slippery rocks, deep water, falling branches, insects, allergies, sharp edges, heat exposure. Several nearby aliens stared in confusion. The apprentice continued. Growing up on a death world teaches you something before you're old enough to understand words. What? Everything can become dangerous if you stop paying attention. The xenobiologist quietly recorded every sentence. Across the command center, intelligence analysts compared historical records with the incoming sensor data. One discovery stood out immediately. Every civilization that had previously encountered the outer swarm disappeared from galactic history. Except one, humanity, the records were incomplete. Most files had been sealed under ancient security classifications that no modern government could access. The princess looked toward her chief historian. Why would humans hide this? They may not have hidden it. What do you mean? They may have erased it. She stared at him. Why would anyone erase a victory? The historian looked toward the apprentice. Perhaps because it wasn't a victory. That possibility settled heavily across the room. Meanwhile, the frontier colonies continued falling silent. Not explosions. Not distress calls, simply silence. Communication ended one system after another. No survivors. No debris. Only empty transmissions. Far beyond explored space, an independent mining convoy became the next to witness the approaching darkness. The convoy captain belonged to a species famous for courage. He had navigated unstable nebulae and survived pirate ambush. Nothing had prepared him for what appeared before his ships. The stars themselves seemed to move. Then he realized they were disappearing behind living shapes larger than cities. The creatures traveled without engines, without visible weapons, without fear. His crew transmitted every sensor reading before turning to escape. None of their messages reached civilization. The signal vanished halfway through transmission. Back on the station, the recording arrived in broken fragments. The final image froze every officer in place. One enormous creature paused. Slowly, deliberately, it turned toward the convoy camera despite being millions of kilometers away. Its countless glowing eyes focused directly into the recording device. As though it had known it was being watched from the very beginning, the transmission ended instantly. Silence returned. The princess noticed something she had overlooked since meeting the apprentice. For the first time since the crisis began, he no longer looked like a mechanic. He stood differently, straighter, more alert. His eyes constantly measured distances, exits, people, and equipment without obvious effort. Years of quiet routine had hidden instincts that now surfaced naturally. One of the apex hunters finally spoke. "They remember you," the apprentice answered without taking his eyes off the stars. "I remember them too," the hunter lowered his voice. "Then you know this is not their full fleet." The apprentice remained silent for several long seconds. When he finally answered, every person nearby wished he had not. "No," he said it calmly. "This is only their advanced scouting force." No one in the command center moved after hearing those words. An advanced scouting force. The phrase echoed through every mind with terrifying clarity. Outside the station, nearly 4,000 warships had assembled in defensive formation. Entire battle groups from rival empires had temporarily forgotten centuries of political conflict. For the first time in recorded history, old enemies stood side by side. Yet the quiet human had looked upon the approaching darkness and called it only a scout. The princess walked toward him, her confidence finally replaced by honest curiosity. "If this is only the beginning, why are you still calm?" He looked through the observation window where the stars continued disappearing behind the advancing biological fleet. "Because panic has never solved a survival problem." She frowned. "Is that something your military teaches?" He shook his head. "No." "Then who taught you?" "Earth." Several nearby officers exchanged puzzled looks. The human continued watching the stars. "Every storm, every wildfire, every earthquake. Every predator, every disease, every mistake. A death world doesn't care who you are. It teaches one lesson over and over. And that lesson is? Keep thinking." His answer was so simple that the princess almost dismissed it. Then she noticed the apex hunters quietly nodding in agreement. One of the hunters activated a holographic map of known space. Red markers appeared one after another. Every colony that had gone silent. Every unexplained disappearance. Every ancient civilization erased from history. Together they formed a pattern. The room grew silent again. The outer swarm had not been wandering randomly. It had been following a path. Straight toward humanity. The station commander stared at the projection. "They ignored dozens of stronger civilizations." "They always do," the apprentice replied. "Why?" "They remember who defeated them." Those words sent another wave of unease through the command center. The princess looked directly at him. "You keep saying defeated. You also keep saying they remember." He remained silent. "You were there." This time he did not deny it. Before anyone could ask another question, a priority transmission arrived from the frontier. The image flickered before stabilizing. A human colony governor appeared on the screen. Behind him, civilians hurried through underground shelters while emergency sirens echoed endlessly. His face was exhausted but not frightened. "We have visual contact." The station commander leaned forward. "Status. The enemy has entered the system. Can you hold?" The governor glanced toward someone outside the camera. "We're buying time." The transmission shifted toward the surface. The princess expected to see armies retreating. Instead, she saw construction crews, farmers, engineers, rescue workers. Ordinary men and women reinforcing shelters while calmly directing evacuations. Children carried medical supplies. Elderly citizens organized equipment. Nobody screamed. Nobody fought each other. Nobody surrendered to fear. One alien ambassador whispered in disbelief. "They're acting as though they've trained for this?" The apprentice answered quietly. They have? The ambassador looked confused. Against these creatures? No. Against disasters? He watched the recording with quiet pride. Humans learn early that waiting for perfect conditions means dying where you stand. The princess continued watching. One young engineer smiled while repairing a damaged power generator despite explosions shaking the ground. Nearby volunteers formed rescue teams without waiting for military orders. People simply saw problems and solved them. No one asked permission. The transmission ended moments later as communications were lost. Silence returned once again. The princess slowly realized something she had never understood about humanity. Their greatest strength was not weapons, it was mindset. Every species admired courage, humans expected hardship. There was a difference. Across the station, military analysts continued studying historical archives. One forgotten document finally unlocked. Its security classification had remained sealed for over 700 years. Most of the file had been corrupted. Only one sentence survived intact. If the swarm returns, find the first hunter. He already knows how to stop them. Every eye turned toward the apprentice. The princess spoke softly. You're the first hunter. He nodded once. Long before the apex hunters became legends, he had trained the first generation. Not because he was the strongest, because he had survived encounters no one else had. Because he understood the enemy. Because he had walked away from battles that should have been impossible. One young officer looked at him with disbelief. How are you still alive? The apprentice smiled faintly. I've been asked that many times. You still haven't answered. I was too stubborn to quit. Several apex hunters laughed quietly. It was the first laughter heard since the crisis began. The princess found herself smiling despite everything. Human humor appeared at the strangest moments. Perhaps that explained another part of their resilience. An emergency officer suddenly interrupted. Multiple hyperspace signatures. Everyone looked toward the tactical display. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. More fleets were arriving. For one tense moment, many feared the enemy had already reached the station. Instead, identification codes filled the screen. Human fleets. Old destroyers. Cargo transports converted into carriers. Mining vessels carrying defensive weapons. Exploration ships, medical ships, civilian convoys. None of them belonged to a single government. They came from independent colonies scattered across human space. One message accompanied every arrival. We're here. Tell us where we're needed. The princess stared at the growing fleet. No one ordered them. The station commander slowly shook his head. They came anyway. The apprentice finally smiled. That's humanity. One by one, more non-human fleets arrived as well. The Royal Navy. Merchant defense leagues, independent explorers. Even civilizations that had distrusted humans for generations answered the emergency call after witnessing the approaching threat. The command center transformed into organized determination. Fear remained, but it no longer controlled anyone. The princess stepped beside the apprentice once more. I laughed at you. You did. I judged you because you looked ordinary. You weren't the first. She lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. He picked up his old tool bag. There are more important things to worry about. At that exact moment, every sensor aboard the station sounded its highest level warning. The darkness ahead was moving. Not toward the frontier anymore, toward them. The biological fleet suddenly divided into countless formations, surrounding the station from every direction with impossible precision. The largest creature in the center slowly unfolded structures resembling enormous wings stretching hundreds of kilometers across space. Then every communication channel activated by itself. A single ancient voice echoed through every ship, every station, and every command deck across the galaxy. We have found the human who taught the hunters. A brief pause followed. Then came the words that made even the apex hunters tighten their grip on their weapons. This time he will not escape. The ancient voice faded, leaving the entire galaxy wrapped in silence. Every fleet waited. Every commander held their breath. The massive biological creatures surrounding the station drifted closer with terrifying patience, their glowing eyes fixed on a single human standing beside an old toolbox. The apprentice stepped forward before anyone could stop him. The apex hunters moved to follow. He raised one hand. No, the 6 legendary warriors stopped immediately. You trained us? Their leader said quietly. I did. We stand with you. The human smiled. I know. That is why I need you somewhere else. He turned toward the tactical display. The swarm has always hunted one target while ignoring another. They focus on the strongest threat in front of them. The station commander quickly understood. You want them chasing you. I've done it before. The princess stared at him. You're sacrificing yourself. He shook his head. I'm buying everyone else time. Before anyone could argue, he connected his old notebook to the station's command network. The officers looked confused. That notebook is connected to the system? It was never just a notebook. Hidden beneath its worn cover rested one of humanity's oldest quantum memory cores, protected inside something no thief would ever think valuable. Thousands of encrypted files appeared across every command screen. Ancient battle records, biological scans, weakness analyses, survival manuals, tactical simulations. Centuries of forgotten knowledge flooded every military database in the Alliance. The station's artificial intelligence immediately began updating fleet strategies. One scientist gasped. This is impossible. The files described every stage of the swarm's evolution, their communication patterns, their hunting instincts, even their greatest weakness. The apprentice looked at the gathered commanders. The swarm thinks like a predator. He pointed toward the tactical map. Predators expect prey to run. The princess slowly finished his thought. So we don't, he smiled. Exactly. Orders spread through every allied fleet. Instead of retreating, human captains advanced. Alien commanders hesitated for only a moment before following them. For perhaps the first time in galactic history, dozens of civilizations abandoned centuries of different military doctrines and adopted the simplest human strategy: stand together, protect each other, keep moving forward. The swarm reacted instantly. Its perfect formations shifted. The creatures had expected panic. Instead, they encountered coordinated resistance from enemies refusing to scatter. The apprentice watched carefully. They're adapting. So are we, answered the station commander. Across the battlefield, cargo ships shielded evacuation vessels. Mining lasers became defensive weapons. Construction drones repaired damaged warships while battles continued around them. Medical ships ignored incoming fire to rescue survivors from every species without discrimination. The princess watched human civilians working beside alien engineers who had considered humanity primitive only hours earlier. No one cared where anyone came from anymore. Only whether another life could be saved. The lead apex hunter smiled beneath his helmet. This is why they never understood humans. The princess looked toward him. What do you mean? They thought human strength came from surviving a death world. It doesn't? It begins there. He watched rescue teams crossing between damaged ships. But real human strength is what they choose to protect after surviving it. Meanwhile, the apprentice uploaded one final file into every allied computer. Its title was simple: Earth Survival Principles. Inside were lessons so ordinary that many officers almost laughed. Stay calm, work together, protect the weakest. Adapt faster than the problem. Never waste what can still be used. Never stop learning. Keep going. At first glance, they looked almost childish. Then, alien commanders realized those same ideas were transforming the battlefield. The swarm had evolved to overpower civilizations through fear. Humanity answered with cooperation. The swarm expected surrender. Humans kept rebuilding. The swarm destroyed one ship. 3 more took its place. The creatures began making mistakes. For the first time in thousands of years, confusion spread through the living fleet. The apprentice nodded. They're learning. The princess looked nervous. Isn't that dangerous? Yes, but you're smiling. Because they're finally learning the right lesson? She waited. He looked toward the stars. You never invade a species that has spent its entire history surviving impossible odds. The Allied fleets launched one coordinated counterattack. Not driven by revenge, not by hatred. By determination. The living formations of the swarm broke apart as their own hunting instincts turned against them. Cut off from their coordinated movements, the enormous creatures withdrew toward deep space, carrying their wounded with them. They had not been exterminated. They had been convinced that humanity was no longer isolated. Every civilization now stood together. The ancient voice returned one final time. "We remember," the apprentice answered calmly. "So do we." The darkness slowly disappeared beyond the stars. Hours later, rescue operations replaced battle stations. Across the damaged station, humans and aliens repaired hulls together. Engineers shared technology. Doctors treated every wounded patient without asking which world they came from. Old rivalries suddenly seemed very small compared with what they had survived together. The princess found the apprentice sitting beside the same transport drone he had repaired before the crisis. He was tightening another loose panel. She laughed softly. "The galaxy nearly ended. It had a rough day, and you're fixing machines again." "They still need fixing," she smiled. "I finally understand." He looked up. "Understand what?" "You were never great because you fought monsters." He waited. "You were great because you never believed any job was beneath you." The apex hunters quietly gathered nearby. One by one, they saluted him again. This time the princess joined them. Then the station commander, then the diplomats, then thousands of soldiers from worlds that had once feared or doubted humanity. The apprentice returned the salute before picking up his worn tool bag. "The next generation won't need legends," he said. "They'll need good people willing to stand together." As he walked back toward the repair bay, the princess watched in silence. The greatest warrior in galactic history did not ask for a throne. He did not seek applause. He simply returned to work. From that day forward, every military academy in known space taught the same lesson about humanity. Deathworlds had forged human toughness. First Contact had revealed human courage. The Apex Hunters had demonstrated human skill. But the true HFY story was much simpler. Humans became extraordinary because, no matter how many times the universe tested them, they chose to stand together, protect others, adapt, rebuild, and keep moving forward. That was the strength no enemy could ever conquer, and it became the foundation of a new galaxy united not by fear, but by hope.